So over the last year, we have covered several games, and every single one of them, thankfully, we have been able to get to 100%. Actually seeing them like this is quite insane because it really puts into perspective just how many 100% we've got for the channel. But that got me thinking, out of all of the games that we've played, what's the hardest, what are the easiest, which are the ones that I'd recommend the most? Well, that's what we're going to find out. As today, we are going to be ranking every single achievement grind that we have covered for the channel. I'm going to be ranking them on how difficult they are to get that 100%, as well as the reasons why, and if I would recommend them to you. Now, just before we start, I do have to mention a couple of things really quick. Firstly, the last 3 games on the list, Control, Subnautica, and Dark Souls. I am still going through the grinds of these games. However, I still feel like I've played them enough to predict where they will go on the tier list. But when the video comes out on all 3 of them, it may be subject to change and I may have different reasons and a different rating, so take those with a pinch of salt. And as well, folks, you may also notice in the list as well that there are a couple of games in there that I haven't made videos on yet. Some of these have been in the backlog for a little while, and trust me when I say that I'm going to try and get them out as soon as possible to you. So just consider them a little sneak peek onto a couple of videos that may be coming. But without further ado, folks, let's just crack straight on. Welcome to the achievement grind list ranking tier. Welcome. Alright, so the first game that we have up is Alien Colonial Marines, and we are starting with quite a tricky one to place because it's in a bit of a weird state. Now, the achievements are all possible, the 100% absolutely is possible. However, for it, you are going to need a decent sized crew to help you out with the online challenges. Now, the achievements for this game aren't anything too difficult, and they're not exactly the easiest, however, they are all absolutely possible. However, I must stick it in extremely difficult because if you don't have the crew to help you, it is more or less impossible. As I said, it's a really tricky one. However, I would recommend it. Next we have Portal, a game that I have not made a video on yet, but hopefully will be soon. Now, this game is so good. It is so fun. The campaign is actually surprisingly difficult. This is the first time I've ever played Portal, and I wasn't expecting to have the entire game done within 3 hours. However, the problem comes from the challenges that it gives you afterwards. A lot of the achievements around this game revolve around challenges that you do outside of the campaign, and in them you have different scenarios where you have to only use a certain amount of portals or a certain amount of steps, and honestly, that makes it insanely brutal. It ruined my experience of Portal. I have not been that angry at a game in so long. So again, we're really off to a difficult start. Portal is extremely difficult. Even though the game is short, the challenges will set you back hours. I would still recommend the game, however, it is a lot more difficult than you may think. Next up, we have Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach. Now, honestly, this game isn't anything special. I actually really didn't enjoy the game, but the achievements are fairly easy. There's nothing here that will really trip you up. The only ones that I would even say make this somewhat difficult are getting all of the collectibles, which is just a pain in the ass because you don't have a map and they're really difficult to find if you don't know where you're going. Even with that though, they are still extremely easy, and I can imagine most people being able to get these eventually. So I'm gonna stick it in can be tricky because the collectibles can be tough, but again, you shouldn't struggle with this whatsoever. Next up, Mortal Kombat 1, another game that I haven't been able to make a video on yet. Now, honestly, Mortal Kombat 1 has a fairly decent and easy achievement list. There's only a couple that really extend how long this will take to grind. Out of all of the Mortal Kombat games, this certainly is one of the easiest lists that they've made, which I was very thankful for. The only achievement that I would actually say gave me grief was to get the mastery with 5 different cameo characters, and that's just because it's an absolute grind. It's not necessarily difficult, but it just takes a lot. And even if you do want to boost it in invasion mode, it's going to take several hours to do. So for that, I am going to say can be quite tricky. For the most part, you'll zoom through them, and I would recommend it as well. Yes, so would you look at what's next? Yakuza 0. Now, Yakuza 0 is a game that I have been grinding since August, and it has taken me through an emotional roller coaster that I never would have expected a game to do so. Now, Yakuza 0 is famously difficult. Everything you do will be a challenge. The climax battles, the 100%, having to go through the entire game twice. Honestly, there is so much to do, and if you want to get the 100% on this, be prepared to sacrifice hundreds of hours for it. But even with saying that, this is a game I could not recommend more. I have been loving it. This is the first ever experience I've had with Yakuza, and I have just been loving every single moment. However, it is without question the hardest grind that I have done yet. So Yakuza is the first of 3 games that are going to be the hardest on the channel. Next up, we have BioShock, one of the best games ever made. We all know how good BioShock is, and the achievements are fairly easy. There's nothing really really here that I can imagine you would take too long for. Some of them can be a touch tricky, I suppose, if you're not very good at the challenges or going through the story on the hardest difficulty. However, again, I can't really see many people struggling too much with these, and the 100% should be possible for most. Now, even though I've just said the achievements are easy, I'm going to put this in can be tricky because going through again on the hardest difficulty, the campaign, and the challenges and the DLC, you are going to be on this for quite a while. So I think can be tricky is fair. Next, Spider-Man 2, the latest of Insomniac's and the game that has been blowing everybody away, and myself included. This game is fantastic. However, the achievements, or the platinum in this case, fairly easy. There's nothing really here that will trip you up. And just like the other two that came before it, I feel like this achievement list is pretty much doable for everybody. And you're not exactly going to be sinking the most amount of time into it as well. So Spider-Man 2, I would recommend and I would class as easy. I really don't think it's anything more than that, and everyone should be able to do it quite fairly well. Next, we have Ratchet & Clank 2, one of my favourite games of all time. I love this game more than life itself, and I must say, it is a fairly easy grind. There's nothing exactly here that's going to be too difficult because everything that you don't do in the first playthrough, you're going to get quite easily in the second. So I would say that time is the only thing that you'll be sinking into this. And again, it's still not going to be that much time. However, I am going to put it in can be tricky. Now, LA Noire is one of the more recent videos, so the grind is still very fresh in my brain, and this is quite a hard game to go through. Depending on how you play this, you will need to do at least 2 full playthroughs, and there are a bunch of collectibles, a bunch of RNG stuff, and a bunch of chapter specific stuff as well. Honestly, LA Noire was a lot harder than I was expecting it to be. Now, none of the achievements are necessarily impossible, but they are a considerable time sink. So for that reason, I'm going to put it in quite hard. Now, Sons of the Forest is a bit of a tricky one as well, because when I played it, it was just freshly launched. And I already know that it's had so many updates and so much new content, and I'm actually not too sure if it's got any more achievements. However, the ones that I did do are fairly tricky. Now, a lot of them you will unlock naturally, but there are a couple that will take some considerable time and effort into them, mainly building a house with 1,000 logs, and especially getting all of the food items and stuff like that. So I will say that this is quite hard, because some of the last achievements that you'll need for this game will take a little bit of grinding, a little bit of work, and a little bit of RNG. So for Sons of the Forest, I will say that this is quite hard because the last couple of achievements will definitely take a little bit of going for. Next, another game that hasn't been made into a video yet, we have Sunday Gold. Now, honestly, I absolutely love this game. I didn't know anything about it going into it, and that includes the achievements. However, I can't say the achievements were anything too difficult either. Now, for this game, you will have to kind of go through a lot of collecting, because you need to get all of the weapons and all of the special parts to go for your characters, and you will need to go through this game at least 1.5 times, because there are a couple of choice-related achievements as well. Again, nothing that I'll really say is too difficult, and I'm sure you'll have it in no time, so I'm going to put it in can be tricky. Next up is my personal favourite PSX horror game ever made, Murder House. I absolutely adore this game. The achievements are fairly easy. This is an RTX style horror, so the game's like 3 hours long at an absolute push, and you may have to do a couple of playthroughs, but even if you have to play this game 5 times, that's still half the length of what most of these games will take to complete. So I will be saying that Murder House is going into easy. It's definitely not free, however, it's basically as easy as it gets without being free. Next up, we have Gas Station Simulator, one of the first videos for the channel, and a game that absolutely blew me away on how much time I was going to have to sink into it. Now, don't get me wrong, this game is fantastic, and you will unlock achievements for everything you do. It is definitely not shy at rewarding you. However, for a couple of achievements, namely to getting to level 10, they can be a real grind. So even though you will unlock a lot of achievements fairly quickly, to get the 100%, you will have to put in some time for it. So I will say that this game can be quite tricky, because a couple of the achievements are a real time sink. Next up, we have Batman Arkham Asylum, and before you ask, yes, we are going to be covering the rest of the Batman games, hopefully in the coming year. For the most part, it was absolutely fine. Playing the game on the hardest difficulty wasn't that challenging. There are some collectibles that are a bit of a time sink that you'll need to do. However, I do know that the challenges easily make this game quite hard, because some of them can be fairly unrealistic. However, I still feel like it is something that most people could do if they just put the right amount of time into it. Next up, we have Dishonored 2. Now, Dishonored 2 is a mixed bag, because there's a little bit of everything that you have to do for the 100% in this. You'll need to go through multiple playthroughs of the campaign, get all of the collectibles, do power-specific achievements. I think I had to do close to 3 full playthroughs for the 100% on this one. So again, I'm going going to put it into quite hard. However, not as much as our next game, Prey. Now, Prey was probably one of the most requested videos on my channel ever, and it's one of the only arcane games that I hadn't really played. I was pleasantly surprised by how much I enjoyed Prey, but my god, I hated the achievements. The achievements for this game are an insane grind, just for the sheer amount of collectibles that you have to do. You have to find over 300 bodies, you have to find hundreds of emails, and there's another kind of collectible as well that I can't even remember. But not only that, you then have to do multiple playthroughs of the main story, the entire DLC missions. It is without question one of the hardest grinds that I've done. It's going in extremely difficult. Prey is a task. Next up is Stray. Now, Stray is a fantastic game. Absolutely. I love cats. I'm a cat person, of course. However, I was still blown away by how much they were just banking off the novelty as playing as a cat. The game is very good. And for the most part, the achievements are fairly simple. There are a couple of collectible achievements, a couple of miscellaneous ones that will have you like sleep for an hour in real time. So I will say that this game can be tricky. However, it is again another 100% that I feel like most could get with enough time. The only achievement I remember struggling with really was the one where you have to run away from the blobs without one of them touching you. That one definitely took the longest. The rest should definitely see you through quite easily though. Now, Ratchet & Clank. Ratchet & Clank was probably my most surprising game of the year. I played Ratchet & Clank growing up, however the achievements are insane for this game. Not only will you be playing through multiple times, but you will be grinding for 1 million bolts for so much longer than you'd want to. So I will say that most of the trophies for this will be easily unlockable. However, there are maybe 5 or 6 at the end that will definitely maybe triple the playtime that you put into this for the 100%. So Ratchet & Clank, extremely difficult. Next up, we have the infamous Evil Within. Now, I feel like I don't even really need to talk about Evil Within. Everybody knows that the achievements for this game are difficult as hell, specifically Akumu mode. To have to complete the entire game on the hardest difficulty without getting hit a single time is so frustrating, so frustrating. However, it is also one of the most rewarding achievement grinds that I've ever done, and finishing it felt so good. Absolutely fantastic, but there's no doubt how difficult this game is. However, surprising to some, it's not going in the top 3. It is going into extremely difficult, but it's definitely not top 3 for me. Oh god, do I even have to cover this game? Saw 2 Flesh and Blood. My god, what an absolutely horrid experience this was. The entire game sucks, there are no redeeming factors, but the achievements are fine. They're a very basic, generic achievement list. The only thing that I would say probably takes the most is collecting all of the collectibles. That definitely extends how difficult this game is, so I think at most it can be tricky. I don't think it's anything more difficult than that. However, I would not recommend it. It is one of the worst, if not the worst game I've ever played. Next up, we have Food Truck Simulator from the same people that made Gas Station Sim, and I am quite thankful to say that it is much easier than Gas Station Simulator. The only thing that you're really going to be struggling in this grind with are probably getting every single challenge to gold, getting all of the collectibles around the map, and some more of the miscellaneous achievements. However, I can't say that any of them are too tricky. Again, most people should be able to do the 100% for this one. So, for that reason, it's going to go into can be tricky as well. I would say it's a little bit harder than easy, but only just. Next up, we have the brand new RoboCop game that came out a couple of months ago. Again, another very surprising experience for me, because I wasn't expecting to enjoy it as much as I was. Now, in regards to the achievements, honestly, there isn't that much that'll really trip you up. Maybe a collectible achievement in one of the missions is fairly tricky if you don't know where to go for it. I am going to be saying that most people should be able to do this with no real difficulty, so in easy it goes. Next up, another video that I haven't made yet is Serial Cleaners. Now, this game again was a little bit of a surprise for me. I wasn't expecting to enjoy it as much as I was, and I also don't think I was expecting it to be as difficult as it was. Now, I can't really say that it's too difficult, but I was expecting this game to be pretty easy, almost free to get. However, for the 100%, you are going to have to be quite smart with your pathing, and there is quite a bit to do. However, again, it's a game that I can't say would be any more difficult than easy, so in easy it goes. Most people should be able to get this, it just may take you a little bit longer than you may think. Next up, we have Dave the Diver, and Dave the Diver, without question, is one of my games of the year. This game was absolutely phenomenal. It is absolutely bursting at the seams with content, and the achievement list is quite tricky. For it, you are going to have to pretty much do everything you can to master every part of this game. Now, I can't say any of it is going to be groundbreakingly difficult, however, you may put a lot more time into this than you may think. Now, I would recommend this game more than most, however, I will say that the achievements are harder than most as well, so I am going to put it into quite hard as well. Next Next up is Mirror's Edge. Now, I have a feeling that a lot of you know what I'm going to say about Mirror's Edge, but honestly, this is one of my favorite games. I grew up on this game. It was such an underrated gem of the 360 era, and I honestly still love going back to it to this day. However, the achievements are psychopathically difficult. I cannot stress to you how much these achievements suck. Most of them are incredibly difficult. They will have you do a lot, and you will basically have to master every level, every action, every enemy type. You will have to become a god at playing this game to get the 100%. And that's not even talking about the time trials. The time trials talking about it is getting me angry again. Mirror's Edge for me is the most surprisingly difficult game that I have ever had to play, and it was the game that came closest to me not being able to finish it. I nearly gave up on this game, but we didn't. We got the 100%. However, as you may know, it is going into the top 3 most painful. Mirror's Edge sucked, but my god, is it a good game. Now, next up we have Reverse, Resident Evil Verse, I don't know how you pronounce it, but it is the small online game that came out with Resident Evil Village 3. I don't know, it came out with one of the other games, and I must say, it was alright, it was fine. However, I assume that the servers are already dead for it. But in regards to the achievements, there are only like 12 of them, and none of them are that difficult. You may sink a little bit of time into the ones where you have to get a win with every character, and even though I haven't played this game in over a year, I can't imagine they've added too much content to make this truly any more difficult. So I am going to be putting this in the easy category. Next up, the most infamous BioShock for its achievements, BioShock Infinite. Now, Infinite is my least favourite game in the trilogy, however, I still really enjoyed it, but as you folks may know, the achievements suck. There are so many difficult achievements in here. Playing through the game in 1999 mode absolutely sucks. And then of course we've got all of the blue ribbon challenges, the 2 DLCs, the multiple playthroughs, the gun specific achievements. You will be putting a lot of time and a lot of blood, sweat and tears into the 100% of this. So even though I would recommend it, the grind is extremely difficult and you will need a lot of patience for it. So on your own head be it, but I still would recommend it. Next up, we have my personal pick for Game of the Year, Dredge. I absolutely loved this game. The best way I can sum it up is that it is perfected simplicity, and it is absolutely wonderful to go through. However, for the achievements, I can't say that there's anything in here too difficult. Most of the achievements you're going to get whilst you're just going through the game. However, I will say that going for like all of the aberrations and every fish can take a certain amount of time, and specifically getting all of the upgrades to your nets and stuff at the end can be quite grindy because you just have to basically wait at a port and wait for parts to be shipped in. So I will say that this game can be tricky. However, for the most part, most of the achievements will be absolutely no bother for you. Now, we've just had my personal Game of the Year. Now, next up is my favorite game of all time, Banjo-Kazooie. Banjo-Kazooie is my comfort game. It is the game that has always been #1 for me, and I could not recommend it more. There are no achievements here that I feel like are going to be really difficult. The final fight with Grunty is a little bit challenging, but for the most part, you're just going to be able to sail through this game and go at your own pace. I don't feel like anybody's going to really struggle here, so I'm going to put it in easy, and of course, do I recommend it? It's my favourite game of all time. Next up, we have Bloodwash, another personal favourite PSX horror of mine, and honestly, this game is fantastic. It is a short, small, little blast of wonderful horroriness, and the achievements are pretty much as easy as they get. You are not going to be struggling with this game whatsoever, and even if you do miss an achievement, it's going to take like 2 hours max for you to go through the game again and get it. So, Bloodwash, because of how small the game is, it's essentially free. Next up, we have Metro 2033, a quite surprising game because I wasn't expecting so many people to request the series. And yes, we are still going to be covering Exodus very soon. Now, for the Metro games, I have been playing the Redux versions, which change the achievements and honestly makes them a lot easier. The original 360 versions have some brutal achievements on there, but there's nothing in this version that I would say is too tricky. And besides some grinding of particular achievements or items or weapons and stuff like that, you're going to be absolutely fine. So I will say that Metro 2033 is quite tricky because of some of the specific stuffs, but for the most part, you'll be absolutely fine. Next up, Dishonored. This game is always going to have a special place in my heart. Now, this is the first game that I ever covered on the achievement grind, the one that kind of got us to where we are now, I can comfortably say. Dishonored is a fantastic experience. I cannot believe I was so wrong by saying I didn't like it as a kid. However, the achievements suck. The achievements are are extremely difficult for Dishonored. Not only do you have to do multiple playthroughs and play in very different manners, such as no killing, no detection, stuff like that, but then you've got the Dunwall City trials, and that just instantly doubles the difficulty for this, because some of the achievements bound to those are absolutely ridiculous. If you want to cover Dishonored for yourselves, be prepared to put in a lot of time, be prepared to cry quite a bit, and throw things. However, surprisingly, Dishonored isn't taking the third spot on most painful. This one is going to extremely difficult. As I said, prepare to suffer for this one, but there are harder games out there. Next up, we have The Last of Us. I feel like one of the best stories in gaming that has just ever been made. However, the achievements for this game absolutely suck. Like 80% of the achievements are collectible related, and the rest are just really random. So I am going to be putting The Last of Us in. Can be tricky just because of the sheer amount of collectibles, but honestly, there's nothing too difficult about them. Now, next up we have Parasocial, another PSX horror, and honestly, it is as easy gets. The game isn't the best, there are definitely better chillers art games out there. However, for the achievements on this, you will have to do 2 playthroughs at absolute most, and it'll take about 4 hours to do. You can definitely get this done in one day, in one sitting, and it's free. It's as free gets. Next up, we have Gun. Now, Gun is basically the catalyst for all of the Western shooters that we have today, and a game that I feel is horrendously underrated. However, the achievements for this, oh boy, are they difficult. Now, honestly, 85-90% of them are absolutely fine. You're just going to be doing what you're going to be doing in the game anyway. Get all of the skills, get all of the weapons, get all of this, do the campaign, stuff like that. However, the difficulty of the achievements come from the fact that you have to play the game 4 times. And on the hardest difficulty, oh my god, it is a miserable experience. Honestly, I feel quite confident in saying that Gun's hardest difficulty is probably just as hard, if not harder, than World at War Veteran. It is honestly unrealistic how brutal the hardest difficulty is. So you should not be surprised in the slightest when I put Gun in extremely difficult. Honestly, you will suffer if you want to go for that one. Now, next up we have Maneater. Honestly, there isn't that much to talk about with this game. The achievements are fairly free. You just basically have to 100% the game, which won't take you as long as you may think. The game's quite fun, it's quite funny at times, and it's just a great experience that I would recommend. Maneater, I'm going to say, is easy. And there's nothing really more to mention, so let's move on to GoldenEye. Oh, GoldenEye, when this was brought back with achievements, I was so happy. I was so excited to relive my childhood. I used to play this game with my parents all the time growing up. It means a considerable amount to me. Same with Perfect Dark. However, the achievements are ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous, and this game almost made me quit twice. Not only do you have to go through every single mission on every single difficulty, but then you have to speedrun every mission as well, and the speedrun challenges on the hardest difficulty are beyond psychopathic. And even though I would recommend the game, I would not recommend it for a 100%. It is absolutely brutal and will suck all of the love and fun out of it. I cannot stress to you how difficult it is. And folks, again, you may be thinking it's going in the top 3, but it is not. It is extremely difficult, but it's not taking that third space either. Now, next up we have Fallout 3, another personal favourite game series of mine, and Fallout 3, I would say, has you do a lot. You are certainly going to have to go out of your way for the achievements on this one, whether it be grinding the human kills, going for the bobbleheads and stuff like that. You will definitely be spending quite a lot of time in Fallout 3. However, I will say that if you just stick to getting the achievements, it won't take you as long as you may think. You will still have to do a lot for it, don't get me wrong, so I am going to put it in quite hard. However, I will say it should be fairly doable for everybody. Following that, we have Metal Hellsinger. Metal Hellsinger is absolutely fantastic. It was a game that absolutely blew me away. I wasn't expecting the music and the link to the gameplay with that being so good, but I will say that the achievements are fairly difficult. There's only maybe 1 or 2 that you'll have to kind of go out of your way for, but I will say that they are still very possible. So Metal Hellsinger, very simple, very easy, but can be quite tricky. Next up we have Thief Simulator 2 as well. Now, Thief Simulator 2 is a very recent grind, so it's still fresh in my brain. There is nothing really here that you're going to struggle with. It does certainly take a while getting used to playing this game on the hardest difficulty, but even that will eventually come with no problems. And once you get to the end game here and you've unlocked all of the tools and know everybody's routine, it gets quite easy in fact. So I am going to be putting this in. Can be tricky, but for the most part you should be absolutely fine with it. Next we have Mortal Kombat 11, probably one of my favourite Mortal Kombats, which I know is a controversial take. However, for the achievements, I will say that it's as easy as it gets. Now, don't get me wrong, you will still be grinding, you will still be putting some time time into it, but compared to the other ones, it is absolutely fine. The only achievement that I would really say is a problem is the 250 Battle Towers ones, but even then you can just cheese it. Now, even though it is easier than Mortal Kombat 1, I am still going to put it in the same category. Next up, we have Rat Simulator. Rat Simulator was absolutely insane, an experience I never thought I was ever going to get in a game, and one that I probably will never get again. However, the achievements are as easy as they get. It's basically complete the game. Once you've completed the game, you should pretty much have them all, so there's no need to talk about it. Let's just get it in free. Let's move on. Now, next up is Metro Last Light, and very much like 2033, I would say they are more or less identical in what they demand for the achievements. With the challenges and the campaign and the chapter-specific stuff, you are going to have to put a bit of time into this one. However, it's more or less the exact same experience as 2033, and I can't really say that it does anything harder or easier than that game, so I think I just have to put it right next to it. Metro 2033 and Last Light are very linked in their difficulty. And following that, we have GTA San Andreas, one of my personal favourite GTAs and a game that I was extremely looking forward to playing up until I started to go for the achievements for it. This game's 100% is such an unbearable grind at points. The amount that this game asks you to do for the 100% absolutely is shocking, and I was not expecting to have to put so much time into this. And a lot of it will feel like an immense slog because nobody plays GTA to do train delivery missions, but you have to do it for the 100%. So I will also be saying that San Andreas is going into quite hard. Next up, we have The Impossible Game, the first game that I ever played that was designed to make you hate it. And I was never able to beat this game as a kid. However, coming back to it for the achievement grind, it's actually a little bit easier than I was expecting. Now, don't get me wrong, it is not an easy game. You will be struggling on pretty much every single level. However, with every death and every time you make progress, it gets easier and easier. So finishing this game is inevitable if you just put the amount of time to practice the levels in. Once you do, you'll be absolutely fine. So I'm actually going to put this game in quite hard. Now, next up is Dishonored Death of the Outsider. Definitely the weakest of the Dishonored trilogy and the easiest of all the achievements. This is basically DLC, and I think it took me something like 5 hours to get every single achievement, and bearing in mind that is with multiple playthroughs. So you should not struggle with this game in the slightest. I can't say that it's free, however, it is pretty damn easy. Next up is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, one of the games that I was waiting for most this year, and honestly, I really enjoyed it. I started this grind on day one release, and I was having a lot of fun with the game. However, the achievements suck. Not only do you have to put an ungodly amount of time just leveling up characters and getting specific character skills and achievements and stuff like that, there are some achievements that are so rare that if I didn't boost them in a private game, I would not have the 100%. I am very confident that this game would still be going on brutal with what it asks. So this will surprise nobody. Texas Chainsaw Massacre is the game that will be taking the third spot on the top 3 most painful of the year. We are getting there now, folks. Not that many left to go. The next is Spider-Man Miles Morales. Now, this is definitely the easiest out of the Spider-Man games, as it more or less just feels like DLC. Now, I can't say that it's free because you do have to go out of your way for a couple of the trophies, a couple of the achievements, but this will be absolutely difficult to no one to 100%. It is by no means free, but honestly, it's as close to free as you can get without being it. So, it goes in easy. I don't think that surprises anybody. Next up, we have Saw the Game. Now, unlike Saw 2, this game is actually somewhat fun to go through. It's bad and it's ridiculous, but it's almost bad that it's good. However, the achievements aren't anything too difficult here. I think, honestly, the only achievement that will take the longest is curb stomping enemies, because you kind of have to go out of your way for that at a specific point. Other than that, it's going to be so easy to go through, and I imagine that most people will be able to get the 100% on this fairly easily. So, Saw, again, that's going in easy. And speaking of bad games, we have Mirror's Edge Catalyst next, a game that did not need to be made and has done nothing but absolutely bastardize the Mirror's Edge franchise. I hated this game with so much of a burning passion. It's one of the worst that I've ever played, and I'm sorry to say that the achievements suck as well. Nowhere near as bad as the first. However, there is a lot of collectibles to do and a lot of specific stuff that probably will take some time and effort. Now, as I said, it is definitely easier than the first game, but honestly, it doesn't matter. It's a game that I would not recommend. The achievements suck. Do with it what you must. I'm going to be sticking it in quite hard. Next up is BioShock 2, and similarly to Metro Last Light and 2033 being connected, I very much feel like BioShock 1 and 2 are as well. If anything, I would say BioShock 2 is a little bit easier, in fact. Now again, you are going to have to go through this game a couple of times and do a couple of specific things to make every single one of them pop, so like the first one, the achievements aren't tricky in the slightest. Everyone should be able to do this. You just may be sinking a little bit of time into it more than others. So for the same reason, it's going in can be tricky. Now next up is The Evil Within 2, another infamous game, much like the first, on the brutality of its achievements, although I will say that it is a far superior game to the first. I loved the first, but Evil Within 2 was a masterpiece to me. But I must also say that the achievements are just as hard as the first. So once again, expect time, patience, blood, sweat, tears, the lot. It's going in extremely difficult. And it's time for the final Spider-Man. Exactly the same as Spider-Man 2 and Miles Morales. It has to be easy. The achievements don't really sway from game to game, so if you can complete one, you can do the other two just as easily. I'd say the only thing about this game is the 100% can be a touch grindy, but nothing that will ever give you any harm. So again, Spider-Man, easy, we all know that. And speaking of easy, the next is Viva Pinata, one of my favourite games of my childhood and the first game that I ever played for the Xbox 360. I adore this game. However, it must say that the achievements also are fairly easy. Most of them are free, and just by playing the game you will unlock pretty much 80% of them. You will have to go out of your way for a couple. Now, the only achievement that I would say is somewhat difficult to go for is the 50 hours one. There isn't 50 hours worth of content in the game, so it can get a little bit boring towards the end. However, it's nothing too difficult. So once again, it's going in easy. And it's time for the final PSX of the list. Next, we have Rewind or Die. Now, this game, again, fantastic, another absolutely wonderful game. And thankfully, I can't say that this one is free. You do have to play a little bit clever here. You do have to do multiple playthroughs for different endings, and you have to have your wits around you for some of the sections. But it is still fairly easy, so let's put it in the, where should we put it? Oh, easy. Yeah, that's all right. Yeah. All right, down to the final 6. The next is Cult of the Lamb. Now, Cult of the Lamb, again, for the most part, is a very easy game to go through. However, there are some achievements that will be quite tricky, namely the killing all of the bosses without getting hit. They are certainly the ones that I struggled with the most, as well as collecting all of like the cult faces that you can put on your characters and stuff like that. However, for the most part, you're not going to struggle too much, but I will still be putting this in can be tricky. And following that, we have Deathloop, another arcane game that I honestly feel like is quite underrated. It genuinely deserves more love than it gets. And the achievements for this game can be quite tough. You are definitely going to have to go out of your way for a lot of achievements on this by killing different visionaries in different ways and stuff like that. Now, I would say that a lot of it is possible, but again, this one is quite the time sink. So depending on how you play, I would say that most could get it, but you just need to really go for it. So I will be saying that Deathloop is quite hard. And the final game of the completed ones, we have Guardians of the Galaxy, another really surprising game for me because I enjoyed this a lot more than I was expecting it to. And I can't say that any of the achievements are too difficult. The only ones that you're going to really struggle with are the collectible ones, but if you follow a guide whilst you're going through, you should have no issues. There are a couple of ones that you really have to go out of your way for, like killing certain enemies in a specific like attack that like Drax or Groot can do, but I can't say they'll take too long to go through. So again, I'm going to put Guardians in can be tricky. Now for the last 3 games, folks, these are the 3 games that I'm currently still grinding. However, I feel like I've played enough to have a basic understanding on where they'll fall in the list. So starting with Control. Control is a weird game. God, it is weird. Now, as I said, I'm still going through this game, but I am not struggling with any of the achievements. Some of them I'm definitely having to go out of my way for, but just for the collectibles and picking up notes and pages and stuff like that, getting all of your skills up, it's a fairly generic list. However, I'm still having a lot of fun with it. So for now, I think I'm going to put it in can be tricky. Now, next up is a bit of a weird one as well, because Subnautica is very difficult for me on a personal note. My biggest phobia, my biggest fear is open water. It absolutely terrifies me, so having to play a horror game based on that, every time I load up this game, it absolutely drains me, and by the time I'm done 3 or 4 hours, I'm exhausted. So I personally think that this game is quite hard, except the achievements aren't the hardest thing. It's just getting comfortable moving around the ocean. So it's quite difficult for me to rank this game because it's completely based on your own preferences and phobias, I suppose. However, if the achievements themselves, they're not that difficult. It's just the game itself, for me, that makes it hard. So, being unbiased with my own phobias, I have to put it in can be tricky. It isn't the worst experience and it isn't going to take a while, but if you have a phobia of water like myself, it is tough. So, I feel like that's a decent compromise. And the final game, folks, we are there, is Dark Souls, and I feel like we all know where Dark Souls is going. I have just finished this game for the first time, and I have to do nearly another 2 playthroughs for the 100% on this game. It's extremely difficult, obviously. The entire game is a nightmare to go through as is, let alone having to finish it 2.5 times for every achievement, having to go out of your way for all the pyromancies and the miracles and the sorceries. You are going to be putting a lot of time, a lot of patience into this game, and it's going to suck. However, I couldn't recommend it more. Every single victory victory feels great, and honestly, I'm loving it so far. So for me, obviously, it's going into extremely difficult. And there we go, folks. That is it. That is every single grind of the last year ranked from hardest to easiest, and honestly, I'm quite happy with that list. I feel like I've been quite faithful with a lot of my decisions and even unbiased in some situations, so I hope that translates well. And of course, folks, you'll have to let me know down in the comments if you disagree with anything on this list. If you say think Stray is the hardest game ever made, tell me, explain to me. I would love to have a conversation about it. So let me know down in the comments below. And again, thank you so much for watching. I've really enjoyed kind of summing up the year like this, and hopefully I'll do this next year. So if you did enjoy the video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more achievements and achievement content in the future. I would really appreciate it. And a lot of these games we did the grind live on Twitch as well, so if you haven't yet, feel free to go swing by there and check it out. It would be lovely to have you. But folks, that is it from me today. Thank you all so much for watching. I really once again hope you enjoyed the video, and I look forward to hearing what some of you have to say about this. So until then, thank you all so much for watching. Take care. Bye bye for now.